Final Destination Bloodlines is the latest in the franchise and comes almost 14 years after the release of the fifth movie. This is directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein, and it's actually one of those things where I remember when the fifth one came out and there was this, sort of revitalization of the franchise, and I thought, well, there's going to be a sixth one pretty soon, right? Finally got one. In this one, we follow Stephanie Reyes, a college student who is having very vivid and disturbing nightmares of someone else's premonition of death. And what happened in that situation seems to imply that her family could be on the chopping block next. Eventually, when she goes to warn them that something could be happening very, very soon, all of the members of her family are suddenly faced with some very imminent danger. And you know how this usually goes when it comes to Final Destination. They are now in situations where they may or may not live to tell the tale. And things escalate more and more as the movie progresses. And it's that basic formula that keeps people coming back to these movies for the most part. I actually have a very soft spot for a lot of the Final Destination movies. Save for 4, which I think unanimously everybody says is pretty terrible. I thought the first 3 were actually pretty fun. I had a lot of fun watching the first one, and then the second and third movies. There were some very innovative kills in there, some really brutal moments, and some decent characterization so you could get behind a lot of things that were happening. And there were some really cool ideas, especially when it came to the inevitability of death that it was juggling with, and that there are some things that can be, escaped and they can be cheated, but how long is the real question. And I thought the fifth one was also a really solid time. If I was to think about it, I would say the first one was on top and then the fifth one, but then I also liked 2 and 3, like I said, and 4 just did not work for me. Having seen Bloodlines, I think this is the best one since the first. I actually really liked this movie. I'm actually surprised at how much I did like this movie because I didn't go in knowing a lot about it. I saw the one teaser trailer of the character in the tattoo parlor, and that's where I stopped. I was like, I've seen enough. I don't need to see more. And I didn't see the main trailer, and I had no idea what to expect from the movie. And to my surprise, I was very invested in what was going on, and I really liked what Lipovsky and Stein did with the story that was provided over here. And I have to say, it leads to some really great death sequences, which you of course expect from a Final Destination movie. I don't think that's a spoiler. Things are going to happen to characters in this. And the way that they go about it, while also circumventing certain expectations as to how a scene might play out, I think that's what makes it so interesting. And there is definitely a sense of, visceralness to all of those sequences that the movie delivers in spades. I saw this in IMAX, and there are moments where the aspect ratio changes, and I think that this is one of those cases where it uses that very neatly. Like every time there is a big moment that's about to happen, the way that it uses that scale is a lot of fun, and there are some stunning sequences that you get from that. There's this one that you may have seen in the marketing of a building where something happens. It's brilliantly done, and it's one of the best sequences, I would say, of the entire franchise when it comes to just how wonderfully it's executed. I know that sounds kind of sadistic to say, like wonderfully executed sequence where people might die, but I mean, it is really a very well-directed moment. And the characterization that you get is also pretty decent as Stephanie returns home and she starts to meet her cousins once again, and they're in different places now than they were before, and some of them have frayed connections unlike what they used to have. The movie does a good job of putting, certain characters together and grouping them together and just creating some bonds between them. Some bonds I would say are more effective than others. There's a couple of dynamics that don't really go anywhere, and they could have probably had a little bit more with those characters, but I think when it comes to things like Stephanie and her brother, or a couple of her cousin brothers as well, like there's some really good stuff going on over there, and it works enough that when the going gets tough, you're involved in these characters, you want them to make it out of those situations. All with a sense of self-awareness to everything that's happening, which is something that I also will say, this is a very funny movie. Of all of the Final Destination movies, I think this might be the funniest one. I had a lot of laughs during this movie, and there's a couple of times, especially when they are subverting how a certain thing will play out, where I genuinely thought they did a very good job with some of the comedic beats. There's a couple of characters, especially one of her cousins, Eric, who I thought was extremely funny with this too, and I think one of the scene stealers of the movie, in fact. But when it has to get serious and when it has to get more intense, it rides that line really well too, because of course death is not fun, and when people die in this, it's brutal. But like I said, some characters could have had a little more time. There are some, cliches when it comes to how some characters are presented. Like, there's always that one character who's kind of a skeptic to everything. So as Stephanie seems to be putting this together and pointing to things that could lead to more awful situations, there are those who'll be like, no, what are you talking about? Get a load of this woman. Are you crazy? This is some bullshit. There's always one of those characters. And there is a similar situation that happens with this movie too. And so some sequences play out as you'd expect them to, because the death is one of those inevitabilities, and the way that the movie plays with that, again, it's effective. But there are some times where I think you can see things coming, because again, when it comes to the formula of the Final Destination movies, after 6 of them now being the 6th one, you kind of know how some of it is going to play out. But when it doesn't exactly go in the same way that you want it to, and sometimes some deaths play out differently, even though after a while of a scene, you might know what is about to come next, it plays that again very cleverly. And I think it does lead to a very solid experience overall. I do actually recommend checking this out quite a bit, because I did have a lot of fun with it. Very surprisingly so. And I'm curious to know how fans of the franchise are going to feel about it, because again, I do think it's one of the better entries. And also, before I wrap up, I want to say Tony Todd is in the movie. This is his final performance, I believe, as Bloodworth. I was so glad to see him one last time. He was one of the greatest when it came to the horror genre, one of the pillars of the community as well. And the fact that you get to see him again over here and just have another moment with him was really, really wonderful. And I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss hearing that voice. I'm going to miss his presence on screen. He truly was one of the greats, and may you rest in peace. I'm going to give Final Destination Bloodlines an 8 out of 10. Yeah, I'm actually surprised I went that high. Like, I really, really had fun with this, and I do recommend it. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.